Today on the DI, we're going to go a little bit off the cuff, and we're going to talk about my top 10 favorite Atari 2600 games. And in no particular order, we're going to start with number 10, Frogs and Flies. Frogs and Flies is a great player versus player game that my brother and I spent hours trying to decimate one another. As you control your frog hopping back and forth between the lily pads, you try to catch the flies and score points. As the game progressed, the day turned to night, and once the firefly came out, it brought out the end, and that was the end of the game. This was a great two-player game that my brother and I spent hours and hours playing against one another on. Moving on to number 9, Atlantis. Atlantis was a really great game to play for me, as you spent most of the time defending your base and keeping your buildings from being blown up. Your guns could also be taken out by the enemy, which made it very hard to defend the base. I'd like to also note that you could see like the Star Trek Enterprise here, and also the Star Wars Star Destroyer, and then the fast little speedy thing is definitely an X-Wing. Once you have all the structures knocked out, you leave in the Cosmic Ark, which is to save your colony's race, which I believe is the base for the Atlantis 2 Atari game. Number 8, Frogger. Who doesn't love a home version of an arcade game? Frogger was definitely a faithful adaptation of the arcade game for the Atari 2600. It was definitely a lot of fun to play, and I was really glad I had it in my collection of games. Number 7, Maze Craze. This is yet another one that my brother and I spent hours playing with and against each other on this game. One of the nicer things I always liked about Maze Craze is that you could actually select a level where part of the middle's missing, and you had to kind of feel your way through it to find your way through the maze. We always liked the really speedy version here, where you could just zip through the maze really quick, and you also had where like the cops basically ran around and catch you if you weren't careful. Number 6, Pitfall. I could never really get terribly far in this particular game, but I always loved the fact that, you could stand on the alligator's eyeballs so they wouldn't swallow you, and like jump over the sinkholes, and then swing on the vine, obviously, because you want to hear the Tarzan noise. But other than that, this game was really great and fun to play and put in from time to time. Number 5, Adventure. What can I say? This game was just oozing with cool when I would play it. The fact that you would like get the sword and get the keys and get the chalice and just get like random other things in there to like, fight against the ducks and beat the dragons. What a great game, working your way through the mazes. And then to find out later, like in one of the magazines, my brother and I found out that like there was an Easter egg in there, and then how to do it. We finally got to do it, and it was like one of the first games I ever remember having something like that in there, and it was just like the coolest thing ever. It's like, oh, hey, there's this really hidden thing in a game, and it was just like nothing we'd ever seen before, because really it's one of the fairly early examples of having an Easter egg in a game. Number 4, Combat. What a great game Combat was. You had tanks and planes, but mostly my brother and I, we played the tanks, and we loved the level where it was like the tanks were invisible, but the bullets also bounced, but like if you hit one of the barriers, like it would show where you were, you would kind of flash on the screen, or whenever you shoot, it would actually show you for a brief second. You'd drive around invisible and try to actually take each other out. One of my favorite games to play against him. It was just awesome to play. There was also one level where you can kind of slightly steer the bullet, so you could kind of like curve it around a barricade to hit somebody. That was another good one that we liked to play together. Now, many years later on the Wii console, there was the game Wii Play, and it had a mini game called Tanks. This game was actually the spiritual successor of the tank portion of the Combat game. On the YouTube channel, Nilly896 actually goes through all 100 levels of this game, and I'm going to put a link in the description and give a good shout out to him, because this was a pretty awesome feat. You can actually see here that the level design actually looks very similar to the tank portion of Combat. You even have the invisible tanks, which is amazing, and the bullets also bounce around. It was like, I couldn't have asked for anything better if you wanted to remake this really classic part of this Atari 2600 games. And kudos there to Nilly896 for their awesome job on playing through this Wii game. I know you're gonna hate me, but number 3, E.T. A lot of you are probably gonna ask, why do I like E.T.? Well, back in the day, we didn't have a lot of games, so whatever game we got, that's the ones we like, because we played them over and over and over and over and over. I beat this game many times, and it'd take a little bit to figure out, but, going through the manual I was able to do so. So I really did enjoy the challenge of putting everything together and getting E.T. back to his home world. Now, if you're like, this game has nothing to do with the movie, well then let's go on to number 2, Raiders of the Lost Ark. This Atari game was amazingly awesome to me because it was an Indiana Jones game. But I don't exactly remember him in the movie, throwing a grenade to blow a hole in the wall, and then, getting away from the tsetse flies and grapple hooking across the mesa to then parachute down and go under a branch to then dodge a bunch of things and get down there and dig the Ark out. So if you're gonna hate on E.T., you might want to hate on Raiders of the Lost Ark. One of the coolest things about Raiders of the Lost Ark is you actually had inventory management that you had to do. So down here at the bottom, you had the stuff that you bought or found that was in your inventory. You actually had to use Controller 2 to select it. That was kind of an ingenious workaround for basically only having one button on the joystick. So now that we've gotten through Raiders of the Lost Ark, now we're going to come to my number 1 Atari 2600 game, River Raid. I don't know what it was about River Raid, but I absolutely loved playing it. You're like zipping down the river, shooting down boats and jets and helicopters, and having to go over the fuel areas in order to refuel and keep going and zigzag around this and that. I mean, I don't know what else. It was just so cool. No matter what I did, the game was tough as nails. The furthest I ever got was here towards the end of level 14, where it had a very sharp turn to get to the bridge and blow it out and go on to the next level. I could never get past it, but I digress. Still one of my top favorite games of all time. So that pretty much concludes our top 10 Atari 2600 games here on the DI. Let me know in the comments below which games in the video that you like the most, but if you have your own top 10, let me know down there as well. I'd love to hear from you. More videos will be coming soon, so stay logged in here to the DI, but until then, Digital Infinity out.